Hey there, School of Tomorrow. We've been doing a curriculum, history. More Americana was the last one. We've been tying together a lot of threads and networking them, making kind of when we say graph, it's not like a XY graph. It's more like a polyhedron, right? It's a network. Like, think of a network of airports for a global airline. Just think of the hopping from airport to airport along what we would call edges. Between the airports, we would call nodes. We might, right? That's not the only thing you could call them. You could call them airports. Departing for node 17, we don't talk that way now. I want to bring back another dimension to history telling in this whole era, which is the World's Fairs, right? And we can go to this official group based in Paris, I think, judging from the website. Anyway, it's European, and it's been kind of standardizing and branding the World's Fairs since quite a while. And the story of the World's Fair of 64, 65 in New York is what this episode of Defunct Land is about by Kevin Perjurer. There's Walt Disney. He plays a big role in this story and in this whole series called Defunct Land. So Defunct Land is the name of the channel, right? And Kevin Perjurer does these amazingly good, I say, documentaries where we revisit many, many theme parks, but especially because of the prominence of the Disney empire, with Epcot as kind of the crowning achievement, but largely executed by his brother by that time, right? Because where this movie leaves us at the very end is right when we're ready to do Epcot. But Walt Disney has died, so he didn't get to see Epcot. And anyway, there's that story, and I'm always weaving in Buckminster Fuller, and of course, naturally, I would weave in uh, the Buckyball at Epcot and continue the Tomorrowlands meets Bucky's World Game kind of theme, right? That's where I would take it. So this video and the whole channel with an emphasis on Disney and post Disney enterprise adventures. That's something I encourage you to indulge your curiosity in all that. With an eye also towards what this video is more focused on, the World's Fairs thread. Because here, another way we weave in the Bucky stuff is, of course, Montreal 67. Now, what you'll notice here, I'm looking back at these logos, and I'm going to sort of slideshow us through a few World's Fair imageries, and then end up in my neighborhood is where we're going to go with the rest of this video. I'm encouraging continuing place-based education, which in my case, like, pick the World's Fair closest to you, either any time in the past or future, if you know where they're going to be, right? We've got one here in Osaka for 2025, and there's supposed to be one here in the United Arab Emirates right this year. So what's up with that, right? So we can check into these things. Scrolling down, though, you'll notice that the 62 in Seattle is right before the 67 in Montreal. Here's a good place to go search. So Montreal, I already have that queued up actually. Let's reload that. And Spokane also is not on the list. In other words, the official PIE World's Fair party or not committee, commission, whatever. What do they call it? Bureau, right? The bureau here did not officially endorse or accept as a World's Fair under their care, right? They can't stop someone from, they can't, I don't know what the branding restrictions are, But Robert Moses initially wanted the New York Fair in 64, 65 to be under the auspices of the BIE. But they had a big falling out. I mean, they were just, the Americans, or actually Robert himself, is just used to being in charge and not having a bureaucracy over him, like looking over his shoulder and second guessing all his decisions. He had been kind of a boss, right, in a boss state, empire state. So Robert Moses did not get along, given his temperament and his habits of being the boss. This wasn't working well with the Europeans, and so he didn't ever get their official endorsement. And the whole project, and whether it was successful or not, Kevin here, Perjurer, has a specific spin and tells the story, I think, really, really well. I also want to weave in here, and you'll remember maybe, back to the Patty Hearst, and then further back to William Randolph Hearst and Orson Welles and that whole era. You'll remember a Homer Davenport perhaps mentioned, and Gus Frederick, who is behind and helping with this website quite a bit in Silverton, Oregon. And what we're finding out about are, the many connections that we can make going back to the Civil War. Like, this is looking back now. And I would say let's go back in the place-based world, in my section of the woods, through Silverton. That could be like one of our portals to prior space. And now off to, well, let's look at a couple more World's Fair pictures. The one in 39 really got things, and that was on the same property and had a lot of the same players, right? New York 1939 was well executed and had a sort of unified look and feel, and helped establish the expos as an exciting thing that we're going to want to do more of these, right? And so Robert Moses, 20 years later, is planning to resurrect at the same site, right? He's going to use the same site and get a park established for real this time as a legacy. He wants something left over after the park's gone. He's a city planner and he thinks ahead. And this is a channel like that too, in a way, in that my dad was a city planner, and I got used to thinking in those terms. Anyway, here we're back at Liberal University of Oregon. Pick up this thread at some point. Highly recommended. And now, yes, we were going to look at 64 is the one that did not get officially endorsed. And anyway, the U.S. wasn't really totally bound into that whole thing, and has since even further distanced itself from the BIE, and of course from WHO. And the political climate is such that these international organizations have ebb and flow in popularity and clout, right? Long story there, especially when you get into the world of weapons and the politics and the propaganda and the psychological warfare and all that fun stuff. So in World Game, which is kind of Bucky brand for playing World Game, right? That's what we are doing in Grain of Sand. Kirby plays World Game. This is one dude, right, doing that. Okay, so in the playing of World Game, we get to study the history of World Games so far. And in a lot of ways, that includes popular culture and film and television and so forth. So that's what we do a lot. We look back at popular culture and include that in our anthropology. PATH, philosophy, anthropology, theater, and history. Look how this truck has to really jam itself in there. So I'm going backwards in time, I believe. I'll figure that out in a second. Yeah, I'm heading towards a small little demonstration in the asylum district here about our Black Lives Matter, right? And this is like the reading at the Powell's. This is not the main Powell's. They're just putting it in the front window. They're putting like the kind of books people are just talking about a lot now. A bookstore is not necessarily endorsing or saying this is a great book, but they're just saying here's what people are talking about. That can be, of course, better at being a good book, right? There'll be strong opinions on some of those books, no doubt, no doubt. So I'm especially thinking of that book, White Fragility, right? That was like on my echo chamber. I haven't read it yet, but on my echo chamber, that got a lot of pushback. Portland, Oregon. Okay, we're finding ourselves back in time and space. August, about what is the date? 12th, right? August 6th happens. We didn't go to the park and commemorate Hiroshima, but we did. The Physicians for Social Responsibility did something online, according to my former boss and AFSC friend, Arthur Dye. He was in the loop there for a second, which was pretty exciting. So here we are, August 6th, and I feature the basically tight friendship between Portland and Japan, right? That continues to be super important. And Portland has its own like relationships and friendships, as do other cities, right? Based sometimes on their past participation in the World's Fair thing. Like Spokane isn't here. That was an obscure one, and I guess did not have BIE endorsement either. Like Robert Moses didn't have that. So let's end with some pictures first of Spokane and then finish with the small little demonstration here. What do we call it a demonstration? It's being serious and endorsing a certain conversation should continue. Like getting behind what should we be debating about, they're saying. So that was Spokane we just looked at. Here we are. This is a small group, and they're basically just the neighbors, right? So mostly white people, if you want to count it that way. I would say there weren't that many black people here. But that's not to say that you can't do a chant and stay on the sidewalk. I don't think there was much law enforcement here, not that I could see. Not that anyone was breaking the law, I'm just saying there was no reason for it. There wouldn't be any need for it. Okay, so that's just my neighborhood yesterday, last evening. And I note the kids, right? It's a very family oriented event. It's something to come out for in a pandemic and be serious about something. Like we don't just want to party here, although we do want our cider, right? Cider is another thread we could follow when it comes to history and the importance of cider in like Apple economy. There's a lot of other ways to approach history besides what I've been doing here, obviously. But with place-based, you can always get by with food as like take a favorite food or cultural ethnic thing that you eat, no matter who you are, and tell the story of those foods and get more global that way. So the task always is to start in your local time and place and then zoom out quickly along some dimension, which could be a food, right? It could be water, it could be fish, it could be any agriculture, right? Anything like that. So we're back in my house. I think we're going to end up at my bookshelves here in a second. This is actually Kenneth Nelson original, that tiny little tensegrity that just went by. I'll just end, now that we've looked at the Black Lives Matter event, I'll just end back here at C60 again in the Swan and our last meetup, socially distanced. All right, and overview, that's a symbol of overview. We'll talk to you again shortly.